Getting so tired, getting so damn tired of. Getting so tired, getting so damn tired. Getting so tired, getting so damn tired of.
Come on, Lou, on, you've got it.
I might wake up at noon, then maybe hit snooze. Yeah, I'ma just do what I want.
Hello and welcome to the channel. If you are new here, my name is Lewis. I am very much an amateur triathlete. Only been training in triathlon for about a year and a half, and 2 months ago I completed my first full Ironman distance triathlon, it being the second triathlon that I completed. First one was an absolute disaster. If you want to see that, link up here. It basically all went horribly wrong. Second one went a lot smoother. It was a standard distance triathlon. Again, if you want to see that video, link up here. And then the third one was my Ironman distance triathlon, which I completed in 10 hours and 37 minutes, which is quite a respectable time for a first triathlon. Through the process of completing and training for my first full distance triathlon, I learned a lot of lessons. So this is why I'm going to be sharing with you my top 10 tips to help you get through your training and race day for your first Ironman triathlon. These tips are in no particular order and I hope you enjoy it, so let's go. Tip number one, don't get caught up in buying all the latest gear. I know I'm missing something that I need here. Disc wheel, that's what I need. Let's go buy one. As I'm sure you're aware, if you've entered your first triathlon, especially the Ironman distance triathlon, it is an extremely expensive sport with thousands of options for upgrades and new bikes every day and the latest aero this and aero that. Honestly, gear matters to an extent, but you don't need the latest of all the equipment. Don't get caught up in spending a load of money. I did a little bit, thinking that I need certain things to help me with certain things, but really you don't get caught up in it. If you've got a road bike, stick some clip-on aero bars on. You can use any sort of old wetsuit. You can rent wetsuits for a lot cheaper if you need. Don't worry if you haven't got the latest of equipment. You don't need them. Yes, they help, it's ever so slightly, but really the main thing you need to worry about is the training. That's what's going to get you through the triathlon, not the gear that you're using. Tip number two, nutrition and hydration is extremely important. Which gel should I take out today? This is probably one that you've heard many a times. You have to get your nutrition and your hydration right if you want to get round the course. Take Lionel Sanders again as a good example. If he hasn't got his nutrition and hydration on point, doesn't matter what gear or anything that he's got that's to help him, any technology, anything, he's not going to get round the course. It'll be the exact same for yourself. You need to make sure that you've got your hydration and your nutrition on point and that you've practiced both to make sure you know what works for you. And that is a very big key to success if you want to get around the course. So make sure you put them in practice and have got them dialed in for race day. Tip number three, consistency far outweighs anything else. Mate, have you seen my training peaks? It's all green this week. I've absolutely smashed it. So happy. Let's try and do the same next week. Being consistent in your training leading up to your first Ironman, or any triathlon for that matter, is extremely important. Consistency is the key to long-term success in the sport. You can put in one extremely hard run, one extremely hard bike, and extremely hard swim a week, and only do one a week for 3 or 4 weeks. That might get you somewhere, but doing 2 or 3 easy runs, easy swims and easy bikes each week for leading up for the next 3 or 4 weeks or whatever, that is going to be far more beneficial to you than just kind of jumping in here and there with certain bits of training. Obviously we all miss certain sessions and that can't be avoided, but if you can stay consistent in your training, I promise you, you will gain the most success on race day. Tip number four, don't worry if things out of your control go wrong. Control the controllable and stay relaxed. I just know I'm going to punch her or get a mechanical or something's just going to go wrong. Weather's going to be crap. Oh, I'm dreading it. Leading up to your first Ironman triathlon is going to be very scary, especially the day and night before. The nerves will certainly kick in and you can probably find yourself worrying about things that are going to be completely out of your control. If you can, it is easier said than done. Try not to worry about the things that are out of your control. And by this I mean things like water temperature, weather, punches, things like this so easily can make you more nervous than you need to be about race day. But like I say, as they're out of your control, try and put them to the back of your mind and just focus on the things that you can control. For example, nutrition, hydration, water, look at where aid stations are, all these sort of things that can help you on race day. Make sure you're focused your energy on them and not on the things that are out of your control, and I promise you it will help. Tip number 5, practice makes perfect. Just got to keep my head low and my shoulders tucked and I should be good. Something that I valued very highly and paid huge dividends in my first Ironman triathlon was practice makes perfect. By this I mean practicing certain things that you know you're going to be doing in your Ironman. Might sound silly again, but I promise you it will pay dividends. For example, practicing your TT position. It is quite an uncomfortable position, but if you've gone out and done 2-3 hours in TT position, you know that on race day that's going to feel comfortable. Practicing your nutrition and hydration, practicing transitions, practicing putting on and taking off a wetsuit. All these things that you know you've practiced in training and prior to the race will again help settle those nerves leading into the race. If you haven't practiced them, again, it's just more fear of the unknown. Obviously the distance is unknown, but if you can limit these factors that are going to make the race even scarier by just practicing them, and you don't have to practice them too much. Obviously TT position you do, but putting on and off a wetsuit and things like this, you don't have to practice them too much, but it's just settle them nerves again for race day, and it will make the whole day a lot more comfy, I promise. Tip number 6, you don't need to kill yourself with huge 20-hour plus weeks and loads of 6 and 7 hour rides and 3 or 4 hour runs. 6 hours in, 100 miles down, 2 more hours to go. Let's do it. When people think of Ironman, and I did this before mine, you think of huge long training days of 7, 8, 9 hours, putting in silly amounts of riding and running and doing 4-hour training runs and 6-7 hour training rides. And yes, they would be beneficial if you did them, but I promise you don't need to. I think my longest ride leading up to my triathlon, which I did once, was 100 miles, which was about 6 hours, and I did a short brick run off that of maybe 2 or 3 miles, and my longest run, this might shock you, was only 14 miles, which is 12 miles off the marathon distance. Now that you might actually be a bit surprised at, but I promise you don't need to be putting in these huge long slogs of rides and runs. Again, going back to consistency far outweighs that. If you do 1 6-hour ride at the weekend, that's all well and good, but what would be better is doing 3 2-hour rides throughout the week and staying consistent. And also the harder sessions, so doing like 2-hour sweet spot workout on the bike as opposed to a 5-6 hour ride is going to give you the same rough sort of benefits. So you don't need to be doing these huge long weekend rides and runs all the time. Yes, there is a couple that you will need to do, but it's not as bad as a lot of people make it out to be with them sorts of rides and runs. Tip number 7, don't compare how you train to how anyone else trains. As if you've seen what Lewis has done today, he's done a 4-hour bike into a 2-hour brick run. That's ridiculous. It is so easy to look at other people and what they do on Strava, on YouTube, or wherever it is that you can find the data and see that they're putting out these huge sessions or grueling workouts all the time, and you don't need to be comparing yourself to these people. They put out the highlights of their stuff. I do the same, I do it on my YouTube. I put out the highlights of my training, and it might seem like I do a huge amount, but don't compare yourself to these people. That training might work for them, and again, they might be putting out just the highlights of their training. Stick to your plan and what you know and what you're following, and don't compare yourself to these other people, because you will get too wrapped up in what they're doing and not about what you're doing, and it can lead to nerves, it can lead to you thinking you're unprepared or whatever the situation is. I did it on my one. I had quite a long taper in mine. A lot of people putting out big rides still like a couple of weeks before on the race that I was doing, I saw, and it made me think that I wasn't prepared, and I ended up doing a little bit better than them. So I promise you, don't compare yourself to others and just focus on what you're doing, and it will lead to more success. Tip number 8, trust the process and don't overdo it and burn out. This taper's clearly not working. Let's smash this 5-mile run and see if I can get a PB. What I mean by trust the process and don't overdo it is pretty similar to the last point, is don't worry about what other people are doing, what other program people are following. Worry about what you're doing and trust the process that you're following. Every process and plan is going to be slightly different. There's more than one way to get the same result out of Ironman. A lot of people do things differently, but they all lead to the same result at the end of the day. So don't worry about what other people are doing. Trust your plan and your process and follow it as best as you can, and that will put you in the best place come race day. And the second part of that is don't overdo it, in that a lot of people might feel like at the start of their training especially, they're not doing enough because this is such a big daunting race that you feel like you need to be putting in huge hours. And if you've got an easy run, keep the easy run easy. Don't think, oh well, I'll push the pace on this one. Don't overdo it or try and chuck in huge sessions. And if you miss a session, don't try and add it on to the next day's workout. And yeah, and try and stick to the plan as best as possible. Tip number 9, make sure you're prepared. Can't get this suit on. I should have tested it before. Failing to prepare is preparing to fail. This is quite a common term that you may have heard before, but it works extremely well in Ironman. It is all about preparation and setting yourself up for the best possible race day. This kind of links all the above points kind of together, is that if you can make sure you are ticking all of these boxes and making sure nutrition, hydration, you've practiced, you've got all your equipment, it's sorted, and you know what you're doing, and you know where transitions are, and you know where aid stations are, and you know how you're going to be getting in your fuel and your nutrition, and if you've got your puncher kit, where your nutrition and hydration is going to be stored on your bike, and your bike's set up correctly. All these things that you have to prepare in the lead up to race day, if you can make sure that you've done them to your best of your ability, it allows for less errors on race day and a lot more success. But if you fail to prepare these things, it is only going to lead to a lot more hiccups on race day, and it can put you in a horrible place and make your race day a lot harder than it needs to be. Make sure you have double and triple checked everything before race day and prepared everything as best you can, so you don't allow any hiccups on race day, or at least limit them as much as possible. And it gives you a lot more, again going back to the nerves, it sort of satisfies your nerves a lot more, and allows you just to focus on getting the job done on race day. My tip number 10, my last tip, is try and enjoy it. Now this might sound a little bit cheesy, but if you can try and enjoy the whole process, enjoy the training, make ways to find it fun, run with friends, cycle with friends, run in certain places that you've never run before, cycle different routes, make it as fun and enjoyable as possible, and it will make the whole process a lot easier. We all know that Ironman requires a lot of hours, a lot of sacrifices as well, but if you can make it as enjoyable as possible, it will lead to a lot more success on race day. And even on race day, try and enjoy it, especially if it's your first one. Don't race it, don't get caught up in the moment and fly off on the bike and leave everyone for dust and then, you know, blow up halfway. Just try and enjoy it, take it slow, keep it within yourself. Remember, this is your first one. Don't aim for a time, just aim for getting around it and enjoying it as much as possible. And I promise you, you will come out of the race being a lot more happier than if you had to walk the last half of the marathon because you took it a bit too fast. Enjoy the whole process and make it as fun as possible, because it's a fun sport and this is why we all love to do it. There is my top 10 tips. I hope you found them somewhat insightful and can bring them into your training and race day a little bit. If you've got any other tips, please feel free to share them in the comments below so we can all learn together and have successful race days going forward. Please like the video if you enjoyed it, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and I shall see you next time for some more triathlon related content.
Getting so tired, getting so tired, getting so tired, getting so damn tired, getting so tired, getting so damn tired.
No, it makes sense when you watch the video.
Noon, then maybe hit snooze, yeah.
This quill